So welcome back. My next guest is Roy Tschudy, a U.S. Army veteran from Vietnam. Welcome, Roy.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you for having me.
You know, Roy, so as folks know watching Hometown Happenings, we have a veteran. I think it's really important for us to really remind our viewers and our residents about the role, an important role that our veterans have played throughout the history of our country. And we want to recognize that with the veterans that we have living with us today. And certainly you've had a distinguished career in law enforcement, also very involved in a lot of veterans organizations, and you're a combat veteran from Vietnam. So I'm delighted to have you on, and we're honored to have someone such as yourself, a combat veteran from Vietnam, who's going to tell us a little bit about your background and about your service in Vietnam, and also some of the efforts that you've undertaken since. We're trying to help vets and help other folks in partnership with Howard Golden, the former police chief in Spring Valley, who's also a very good friend of mine as well. So, Roy, if you don't mind, let's just dive into your background. Where were you born and raised?
Sure. I'm a Bronx boy. I was born and raised in the Bronx.
What part of the Bronx?
In the Wakefield section off near Burke Avenue, Gun Hill Road, right over there. So my dad was a World War II veteran. He fought in North Africa in the infantry, was wounded. Married my mom. My dad had 3 kids, an older sister, myself, and my younger sister. We lived in the projects in the Bronx. They built those basically for returning World War II veterans. Unfortunately, my dad did pass away at a very young age. He was 41 years old, and my mom was left with 3 little ones. And my mother's a saint. I love my mom's gone a few years now, but I love and miss my mom to this day. But she was a great woman. She raised 3 kids on her own. She never took a dime from anybody or anything. And she worked as a school crossing guard. Then she went to school at night, became a secretary, raised 3 kids the best she could. And we just grew up in the Bronx. That's where I grew up, and went to school in the Bronx. And then after high school, I enlisted into the Army. To be truthful, I didn't have a penny to go to college at that time. So it was good enough for my dad. It was good enough for me, and I just felt the need to do so. So I enlisted in the Army, much to my mom's chagrin.
Tell us a little bit about what year did you enlist, and where did you go for basic?
Sure. So I enlisted at a Fordham Road in the Bronx, and you know, if most of the guys that come from the Bronx, we don't say the Bronx, we say the Bronx, D-A, Bronx, the Bronx. So I enlisted in there, and they sent me down to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Now, up to that point, the Bronx was my entire world, so I didn't know anything about. I said, "Oh, I'm going to South Carolina." So that was basically another language in itself, listening to the Southerners, because when they start barking orders at you, all I heard was "here, here," and I'm here, here, and I'm like, what do they want me to do? Pick up a bush? I don't understand. So it took a while to understand the down there. But
and this was 1966.
1966, out Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and after Fort Jackson, then they sent me down. That was 8 weeks of basic training. I went down to Fort Benning, Georgia for AIT, and I was assigned to a helicopter unit. But prior to that, they had a huge baseball field there. And I was lucky enough, I played for the Army baseball team for 6 months, which was quite a good experience. Then after that, I went back to my unit, and we got orders, received orders to ship off to Vietnam. It was a helicopter unit. I was in a Chinook helicopters. Chinooks, for those that are unaware, are the larger helicopters. So we prepared, did a lot of preparation and training, and then as a unit, we went on a ship. They sent us on a ship from Long Beach, California. Now, normally when you go, the average GI who would go to Vietnam would go as a replacement. So either somebody had completed their year's tour in Vietnam and then came home, somebody was wounded, you'd go replace them, or sadly, as one of the over 58,000 were killed in action, and you'd go to replace them. But we went as a unit, so we went on a small ship called the USS Upshur, and 30 days going across the ocean, where there was a lot of upset stomachs along the way for 30 days. But we arrived. I arrived in Vietnam on January 31st, 1968, which also coincided with it being the very first day of the Tet Offensive. Mm-hmm. And on the second day there, my friend turned to me, my friend Gene, and said, "Roy, if we live through this, we'll make it through the year." So it was quite a welcoming party.
We've got some photos that we're showing now of you at the time and over in Vietnam, and looks like also on the ship as well. So
yeah,
just absolutely remarkable time. But coinciding with the Tet Offensive, what was that like? I mean, that had to be. I mean, you literally embark in the country and they have this major offensive taking place. What was that like for you?
It was scary, and we were stationed down in my company and myself. We were stationed in the lower end of the Mekong Delta, and about 70 miles south of Saigon, and it was oppressively hot and humid, but the first couple of days, actually, my compound, we used to get rocketed and mortared every just about every night or every other night. So when you get rocketed and mortared, you don't know from which way it's coming in, and you just hear that there's a certain pitch to a sound of an incoming that you'd just run for the bunker system, just hoping that you'd get there at night. So so it was quite scary. But then again, we were all 18 years old, and to tell you the truth, 18, 19 years old is kind of adventurous too, But I mean, but it was hairy, for sure.
And tell us just a little bit about. So you're there for the Tet Offensive, and obviously 1968 was a very tough time in Vietnam.
Yes,
a lot of guys were killed. Not an easy time in terms of service. You had some close calls, I would imagine, as well.
Sure.
Maybe you could speak a little bit
Sure.
about some of those and some of the folks that you knew that we lost.
Well, every soldier had a different job when they were in Vietnam. Whether you were a grunt, who was the infantry, whether you were support, whether you were a helicopter unit. So I was stationed on a big base. Can Tho was a fairly large base. So one of my jobs, I had basically two jobs when I was in Vietnam. Once a week I was assigned to a helicopter and as a door gunner, and we would fly different sorties, and we'd fly throughout the day. But one of those, on those sorties, I'd fly into Tan Son Nhut, which is a big air base near Saigon, and we'd pick up a lot of supplies to bring back. And my first sergeant, who was from Georgia, said, "I'm going to put a New York kid in charge of this." So I used to come back with quite a few supplies, some of which they didn't expect, and I won't go into detail on that. But it was all good. And he used to say, "I knew to put a New York kid involved in this." So
and you worked in law enforcement afterwards, and I can assure you the statute of limitations is gone on all this stuff.
I certainly hope so. But then, and then for the rest of the time I was there, in the evenings, my job was perimeter guard duty outside the jungle line in the bunker systems so that we wouldn't get invaded. So I did, and I had one night off, which is basically a Sunday night. That was it. The hairiest part was on tell you the truth, January 13th, 1969, I had about roughly a month to go, and it was a Sunday night. In fact, it was the night of the Super Bowl with the New York Jets,
Oh, wow.
who at that time were a decent team. And they were in the Super Bowl against the Baltimore Colts. And now there's a 12-hour difference, so basically it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and a couple of us had a small transistor radio, so we were going to listen to the game that was given to us through Air America, or one of the channels. And all of a sudden, there was chaos. The compound was lit up. We were overrun. The enemy came in and overran our whole airfield, blew up helicopters. We grabbed, a bunch of us, we grabbed our M16s, our rifles, and ran down to the airfield. And I got separated from some of my friends, and you know, it was a firefight, and you know, I was, you know, my adrenaline was pumping. I was as much as my adrenaline was pumping, I was scared. I was very scared. I thought that I would not get out of it. It seemed forever. There was a lot of loss of that life that night. And unfortunately, one of those losses was a friend of mine who was due to go home the next day.
Wow.
And he he lost his life that night. And but
What was his name?
DeWitt Studway. He was an African American kid. He came from. He's from the South. He's a real gentleman, well liked by everybody, and he was in the command bunker. He wasn't even supposed to be on guard duty. He was a snafu. It was an error. He's supposed to go home, so he wasn't supposed to be on guard duty, but he was. So he was in a command bunker. There was a command bunker, which basically had the sergeant and 5 other guys. It was a nice bunker, secure bunker, because it also had a sandbag top and an M60 in the front, along with the guys with an M16s. Whereas the other bunkers would be stringed along the perimeter of the airfield, and you'd have 2 guys, two soldiers into a bunker with just their M16s, with no covering. So if it rained, you got wet. So the command bunker was like choice bunker.
Right.
Now, ironically, I was in that bunker, the command bunker, the previous night. So if that attack would happen that previous night, I wouldn't be sitting here with you today. So, you know, through God's grace, I am. But all six lost their lives that night.
I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, it was a terrible experience, but
Well, thankfully
it's war.
you survived. And so then you finished out your time in Vietnam. What'd you do when you got out?
So when I came home, I was still, I was basically just 20 years old, and I came home, and I was glad to see my mom, who I love dearly, and my sisters. And again, I'm basically a young kid with just a high school education. What do I do? So I applied for the telephone company, and they sent me to training in New Rochelle, New York, and I was an installer. That lasted 3 months. They decided to go on strike for a year, so there went that job. I got a job in construction, and in the interim, I took every civil service test that you could think of, and I finally did get called for the police department, and I became a police officer in 1974, and I had a nice career.
So you were how many years in the?
23 years.
23 years.
And I retired in 1997, so I've been gone for quite a while. But as my wife says, you're always looking out the window. You're retired. You're not a police officer. I said, I'm always a police officer. I'll be a police officer to the day they close the lid.
Right. We were talking before the interview. One of your details was at Yankee Stadium, and
Yeah.
you got. I asked, had you met any Yankees or famous people?
Yeah. So it was a nice detail because I was always a sports-minded guy, and so I was fortunate to get into that detail. in the wintertime, I was I worked plainclothes, undercover, summonses, arrests, quality of life, things of that nature. But in the summer, like I said, I was assigned to the Yankees, and I met the gentleman that was the stadium's operation manager for the Yankees. And George Steinbrenner had hired this gentleman because he ran the DEA for the United States of America, Drug Enforcement Agency for the country. So he was a really nice gentleman, Jack Lawn. And so I would talk with him outside the stadium all the time. And he noticed under my shield, between my shield and my nameplate, I had a very small pin, a Vietnam pin. And he saw that, and he asked me if I was a Vietnam veteran. I said, yes, I was. And he took a liking to me, and we used to talk about Vietnam and different aspects of the war. So one day he invited me up to his office. And his office was the same office as basically like George Costanza had on Seinfeld, where you could see the field. It was a beautiful area. And one day he said to me, he goes, I would like you to meet a friend of mine. I said, well, sure. And he says, hold on a second. So he just goes halfway to the stairs behind the door, and he goes, Dick, come on in. I want you to meet a friend of mine. And then comes Richard Nixon. So we had a nice conversation, the president and I. And in fact, the president, we sat about as far as we are. He asked me what was my opinion on Vietnam. Here I am, I'm talking to the president. I said, Mr. President, I said, I'll be honest with you. I said, I was 18 years old. I didn't have an opinion. I said, I just felt obligated. My dad fought in World War II, and I felt, here I am in the military. If the military is sending me, there's a reason for me to be here. So, I believe in our country. I love our country. So I went. And he hugged me and he said, your country owes you a debt. And I said, no, my country doesn't owe me anything. It's an honor to. And I said, thank you for getting us out.
That's a great story. Did you meet Steinbrenner at all, George Steinbrenner?
Yeah, once or twice I did. He was he was George Steinbrenner. He could be a real great guy one day, and then another day he'd come in and he'd be a little bit more strict with things. But he loved the police. That's all I cared about. He loved the police, and he wanted to make sure that stadium was clean. If he saw a piece of gum on the floor, he'd go crazy. So, but he liked the police. So we were very happy with that.
Yeah,
it was a good detail.
And I'm sure you met some of the players as well. Yeah.
So I will tell you, there were players who are real gentlemen, real decent guys, and there were some who weren't. So I won't talk about the ones who weren't. But two of the most decent people, nicest guys who would stop, write autographs in the rain or whatever, and talk with us. One was Don Mattingly, the ultimate gentleman. Really nice guy, and he comes from Indiana, and he is just a regular guy. And the other gentleman that I thought was super tremendous is Mariano Rivera, and how he spoke with him was he would come out in the 7th inning to go to the bullpen. So he would go underneath the stadium, past the police station and that was down there. And I stopped him once and asked him to sign a ball, not for me, but one of the police officers, his little son, had cancer. And the police, we were doing a fundraiser, so I mentioned it to him. And he signed the ball, and he said to me, "What's your name?" I said, "Roy." And he said, "Anytime you need anything, you come see me, and we'll take care of it." And so numerous times we did have fun. And, when he used to go out to the bullpen, he'd stop and see me and goes, "Hey, Roy, how are you?" And I'd say, "Hey, Mo." And the other consul go, Roy? And I say, well, what can I tell you? I say, but he is a real gentleman, real nice guy. And, you know, I had a 23-year career. I love being a police officer. I love to help people.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed locking up bad guys, too.
Mm-hmm.
Bad guys, that is. But I love to help people. And that's what we try and do with our,
Mm-hmm.
even now, going
Yeah.
forth with our.
So let's pivot to that. We just have a couple of minutes left. So you have you've been involved with the Vietnam Veterans of America Chapter 333. You were the president of that.
I am the current president.
Right. And thank you again for your service. I mean, just we're awed by it. But one of the things that you've done, the hand cycle program. Maybe you could speak to that.
So a few years ago, in 2013, I was watching a show, and they would showed that they try to get different apparatus for veterans who that the VA doesn't give to the veterans who have lost their legs or spinal cord. So I got in touch with the VA up in Montrose, and I said, what can I would like to be able to start a program. So they mentioned, you know what hand cycles are? I said, I do. And they said, well, that's a preference that they like. So a hand cycle is basically a bike that sits on the ground,
Yeah.
and they use it for cardiovascular, weight control,
Right.
and it also gives them a sense of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So we started fundraising, and to date we've purchased 15 hand cycles for.
What is a bike? I mean, we have an image of it up now. What does a bike like that go for?
So the image there is, that's not a hand cycle.
Well, the one just before. The one just before was.
Okay, so it depends on the individual, because it's tailored to each individual.
Like there's one here. Is this?
So this lady, it was a Naval Academy graduate. She was a pilot, and she got injured, and she has spinal cord damage, so she's crippled.
Right.
So the bike that we have for her, that was a $9,000 bike.
Wow.
So, but we've gone from as low as $2,500 to $9,000, and it's based upon the needs and the wants, the height, the weight, and the injury to that person. So we get it streamlined specifically for that person.
Right. That's absolutely incredible. So then you're raising money, and 15. That's and you're helping individual vets really go on with their life, which is just absolutely.
Yeah,
commendable.
it's a very, very. It's nothing that you're proud to do. It's humbling. It's very humbling when you can do something for another person, and you can see how it's helped their life move forward, especially another veteran, but anybody in general. But when you help another veteran, and you could see how it's helped transform their life, not only physically but emotionally, it's a humbling thing to do. And we fundraise at the mall, and we've done it at street fairs, the boxing matches. So throughout the county, we're all over, and people are very benevolent. They come, and then we generally give them a little thank you that we came up with. So when people, whether they give or not, we'll always give a thank you. But
And how does somebody? How can somebody help contribute? To that cause?
So if somebody would like to contribute, they could send it to the Vietnam Veterans of America Chapter 333, Post Office Box 243 in New City, New York. And and if they want, we can send them something that would for their tax, because we are a 501c319. So, and all monies we received. We've also purchased, if people didn't want that, we bought another gentleman an outrigger canoe, a kayak, and mountain bikes we've bought, purchased for other guys. So, we try to help veterans get something that maybe the VA doesn't provide for them.
Well, Roy, we're just about out of time, but the Vietnam vets, I mean, the watchfires, I mean, maybe you could just speak to that just briefly, and then, one of the things that you do with retiring flags.
Sure. So the watchfires it was started by Jerry Dinellin, who was our veterans advocate in the 80s, and basically it was to promote what George Washington started, because George Washington had watchfires built along the Hudson River after the Revolutionary War to help guide those who were lost or who were coming back to find their way back home. So we do it. We do it every year. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do it last year due to COVID, but we anticipate we'll be able to do it again this spring. And it's a memorial, but we also believe it helps bring the souls of those who are lost along the way. So for 24 hours we burn these.
And they're in 4 locations.
They're in 4 locations, and I specifically do the one at Eugene Levy.
Right. I try and go to all 4 locations every year. I've been doing that probably for the last.
Yeah, it's a really
15
wonderful
years.
experience to go. It starts at midnight and
Yeah.
it goes to midnight the following evening.
Yeah, I've often gone with my kids. They're now in their 20s. My youngest is 18, but I've brought all of my kids, at least once or twice. My son usually goes with me every year.
Yeah, it's quite the experience.
Yeah. But one of the things that you do with that, and it's just these huge piles of like tree trunks and logs, and you respectfully, with dignity and ceremony, as you light the fire, you retire worn American flags. There's a proper way to retire them.
Correct.
I was actually at a ceremony just recently on Veterans Day. A lot of VFW and American Legion posts will have their own flag burning ceremony where,
Yeah.
with respect, then the flags are deemed to be decommissioned and they're burned respectfully. But one of the things that you've done, which is really beautiful, and I'll hold it up, I'll get a close-up of it later on, but you've been able to actually put together the stars from these flags. Maybe explain what you do here.
So to honor the Rockland County KIA who were killed in action in Vietnam, we've made up a name tag, so to speak, with a little picture of them, and it'll say in the front, "Thank you for your support," with his picture, his name, and that he was killed in action in Vietnam. And on the back, we will take a flag. And I want to make sure that this is fully understood because I would never disrespect our flag. This is a flag that's old, worn, and tattered, and is retired, and is going to be burned in a proper way, like you spoke. So I'll remove the star from that flag and add it to the name of that person, that individual, in a clear envelope. So this way we can still honor the flag and honor that individual. And then we give these out to anybody that would like one, and we ask that they please keep it in their wallet or their purse. And if anytime we believe you open your wallet, your purse, and you just see their name, that's how you keep their soul alive. You keep their memory alive. Mm-hmm. And if they would be so kind, if they could go to a site called The Wall of Faces, and you enter his name and hit search, you'll see it'll come up with his face and a little background information on them. And we ask that you would leave a remembrance for them. And we have been contacted by families who have said that they are so touched and overwhelmed that either their uncle, their brother, or a family member has been remembered after 50 years. Because they were only 18 and 19 years old for the most part, and they lost their life through no fault of their own, in honor of our country. Right. And they should be remembered and respected.
Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, it's you're absolutely spot on with it. I happen to I'm holding here James Margro, and we actually dedicated a street in his honor, roughly 50 years, right. 50 years to the day when he was killed in action. His family was there, was over here in New City.
Yeah, I was there. I believe he died on Hamburger Hill.
Yeah, and his family at the time, I think through you, had actually given me this, and given me the same. So
right.
I actually have it in my wallet.
Great.
And I carry it with me, and I'll open it up, and it'll cause me to remember. And it reminds me of a saying that I had in one of my remarks on Memorial Day, and it escapes me now where it's actually from. It's been attributed to a couple of different folks, but and the saying goes, you know, they say that you die twice, your actual death, and then the second time when somebody speaks your name for the last time.
Yeah.
And so in a way, you're really making sure that people are not forgotten.
That's true. And on a last note, we have had people who, once they've adopted them, we tell them, you've adopted this individual, that have gone to Washington, D.C., to the wall, the actual wall, and they've done what's called a rubbing of the name. They actually get chills through their body. Mm-hmm. And I tell them, I said, oh, look, I believe it, and we believe it as Vietnam veterans. That is that soul thanking you for remembering them.
Right. And I can't thank you enough for this. I mean, you've given us a number, so if folks are interested, they can contact my office, they can contact you.
Yes. Through
the Vietnam veterans, and we'll try and keep the memory of the 46 Rocklanders who were killed in Vietnam, their memory alive.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Right. So, Roy, if folks want to get in contact with you again, either to donate for the hand cycle or bike program, or actually to be able to receive one of these remembrances of a vet, how can they get in touch with you?
Again, we do fundraising throughout the county, so they may see us at the Nyack Street Fairs, Suffern Street Fair, but otherwise, if they want to do it, they'd be kind enough to do that. They could do it to the Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 333, located at Post Office Box 243, New City, New York.
Well, Roy, this has been great. Just thank you for being such a wonderful guest, but more importantly, thank you for your service. Combat veteran Vietnam, 23 years with the NYPD, and your continuing service through Vietnam Veterans and the American Legion, VFW, all the vets organizations that you're integral to, and what you're doing to help disabled vets, but also keep the memory of those killed in action alive. Thank you so much.
Well, no, thank you for having me. It's very humbling to be here and to be able to speak on this, and I appreciate all you're doing for our county and our veterans.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.